My daughter's third-grade teacher called Child Protective Services on me, claiming I was an unfit mother. What she didn't know was that I had cameras in every room of my house, and her real motive had nothing to do with my parenting. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Let me start from the beginning and tell you how I discovered that Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, my daughter Emma's beloved teacher, was orchestrating a systematic campaign to destroy my family. It started on a rainy Thursday in November, in our quiet suburban town of Millbrook. Emma had been in Mrs. Mitchell's class for 3 months, and everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, as I would soon learn. Emma bounded through our front door that afternoon, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. "Mommy, Mrs. Mitchell said I'm her favorite student. She wants to have a special parent-teacher conference with you tomorrow after school." My heart swelled with pride. Emma had struggled in 2nd grade with a teacher who didn't understand her learning style. So hearing that she was thriving this year felt like a gift. Mrs. Sarah Mitchell was everything you'd want in an elementary school teacher. Young, enthusiastic, with the kind of energy that made 8-year-olds hang on her every word. She'd been teaching at Millbrook Elementary for 2 years and had quickly become one of the most requested teachers. Parents fought to get their children in her class, and the administration clearly adored her. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I told Emma, helping her out of her rain jacket. "What makes Mrs. Mitchell so special?" Emma's face lit up. "She understands me, Mommy. When I get confused with math, she doesn't get frustrated like Mrs. Henderson did. And she lets me help her organize the classroom supplies because she says I have exceptional attention to detail." As a single mother working 2 jobs to keep our small family afloat, hearing that Emma had found a teacher who appreciated her unique qualities felt like a blessing. Emma's father had walked out when she was 4, leaving behind nothing but debt and broken promises. For the past 4 years, it had been just the 2 of us against the world. The next afternoon, I arranged to leave my job at the insurance office early so I could attend the conference. Mrs. Mitchell's classroom was a cheerful explosion of student artwork, motivational posters, and carefully organized learning stations. She greeted me with a warm smile and guided me to a small table near her desk. "Thank you so much for coming. Mrs. Rodriguez," she said, her voice carrying just the right note of professional concern mixed with personal interest. "Emma is such a special little girl. I can see why you're so proud of her." We talked for nearly an hour about Emma's progress, her strengths in reading and art, her growing confidence in math. Mrs. Mitchell seemed genuinely invested in Emma's success, asking thoughtful questions about our home life and Emma's interests outside of school. "I notice Emma sometimes seems tired in the mornings," she mentioned casually as our meeting was winding down. "Is everything okay at home?" I know how challenging it can be for single parents to manage everything. The question felt caring rather than intrusive. "I work an evening shift at a restaurant after my day job," I explained. "Sometimes I'm not home until late, but my neighbor Mrs. Chen watches Emma. She's like a grandmother to us." Mrs. Mitchell nodded sympathetically. "That must be so difficult for you. Emma mentioned that you sometimes have gentlemen friends over. I hope you don't mind me asking, but I want to make sure she feels safe and stable." Something cold settled in my stomach. Emma had never mentioned anything about gentlemen friends because there weren't any. I'd been so focused on work and raising Emma that dating wasn't even on my radar. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said carefully. "I don't really date. My focus is entirely on Emma right now." Mrs. Mitchell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Oh, I must have misunderstood something," Emma said. "Children sometimes mix up details, don't they?" The conversation ended pleasantly enough, but something nagged at me as I drove home. Why would Emma tell her teacher about men who didn't exist? And why would Mrs. Mitchell bring it up in such a pointed way? That evening, I asked Emma about it while we were making dinner together. "Honey, did you tell Mrs. Mitchell about Mommy having friends over?" Emma looked confused. "What friends? You never have friends over except Mrs. Chen." "That's what I thought." "Did Mrs. Mitchell ask you about our home life? About who comes to visit us?" Emma paused, concentrating. "She asks me lots of questions about you, Mommy. She says it's because she cares about me and wants to make sure I'm happy. She asked if you ever seem sad or angry, and if you ever have people over that make you uncomfortable." Red flags started waving in my mind. While it wasn't unusual for teachers to check on their students' home situations, something about the specificity of these questions felt wrong. Over the next few weeks, the questions became more frequent and more pointed. Emma would come home with casual mentions of conversations with Mrs. Mitchell about our finances, about whether Mommy ever seemed stressed or overwhelmed, about whether Emma ever felt scared at home. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Monday morning in early December. I was rushing to get Emma ready for school because my car had broken down over the weekend and we were walking to school instead of driving. Emma's hair wasn't perfectly braided, her backpack was missing her library book, and I'd packed her lunch in a grocery bag instead of her regular lunchbox. Sorry. "Baby," I said, kissing her forehead as we hurried down the sidewalk. "Mommy's having a crazy morning, but we'll get through it, right?" Emma smiled up at me. "It's okay, Mommy. Mrs. Mitchell says sometimes parents have bad days, and that's normal." When I picked Emma up that afternoon, she was unusually quiet during our walk home. "How was school, sweetheart?" "Fine," she said, but her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. "Mrs. Mitchell asked me about this morning, about why we were late and why my hair wasn't done nice." I stopped walking. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That our car broke and you were rushing. But then she asked if you're always rushing. And if you sometimes forget to take care of me properly because you're so busy." The questions felt invasive, but I tried to give Mrs. Mitchell the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just concerned about Emma's well-being. Maybe I was being oversensitive. But then the phone calls started. The first one came on a Thursday evening while Emma and I were working on her homework. "Hello, this is Sarah Mitchell, Emma's teacher. I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I wanted to follow up on some concerns I have." "Concerns?" My stomach dropped. "Is Emma okay? Is she having problems at school?" "Emma is doing wonderfully academically," Mrs. Mitchell said, her voice taking on a tone that felt simultaneously caring and accusatory. "But I'm worried about some things she's shared with me about her home environment." "What kinds of things?" "She mentioned that you sometimes don't come home until very late, that she's often left alone or with neighbors. She also said there have been times when there wasn't enough food in the house, and that you sometimes seem very sad and angry." None of this was true. Mrs. Chen watched Emma every evening when I worked at the restaurant. We never ran out of food, though I did shop carefully and used coupons to stretch our budget. And while I occasionally felt stressed about finances, I was careful never to let Emma see me upset. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," I said carefully. "Emma is never left alone. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, watches her whenever I'm at work, and we always have plenty of food." "I'm sure you're doing your best," Mrs. Mitchell said, and something in her tone made my skin crawl. Single parenthood is so challenging, but I have a professional obligation to ensure Emma's well-being. I wanted to give you a heads up that I might need to document some of these concerns. Document. That word hung in the air like a threat. After I hung up, I sat Emma down for a serious conversation. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something very important, and I need you to tell me the truth, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Have you told Mrs. Mitchell that Mommy leaves you alone, or that we don't have enough food, or that Mommy is sad and angry a lot?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "No, Mommy. I would never say those things because they're not true. You take really good care of me, and Mrs. Chen always stays with me when you're at work, and we always have good food." "Then why do you think Mrs. Mitchell believes these things?" "I don't know," Emma whispered. "She asks me questions, and sometimes she says things like, 'It must be hard when your mommy has to work so much,' or 'I bet you get scared when your mommy seems upset.' I try to tell her that's not how it is, but she just nods like she doesn't believe me." That night, after Emma went to bed, I made a decision that would prove to be crucial. I called my brother Miguel, who worked in home security, and asked him to install cameras throughout our apartment. Not because I was paranoid, but because I had a growing suspicion that this situation was going to escalate. And I wanted documentation of what our actual home life looked like. The cameras went in the next day, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway, and one covering the front door. They were small, discreet, and recorded continuously to a cloud storage system. 3 days later, Mrs. Mitchell called again. "I'm concerned that Emma seems withdrawn lately," she said. "She's not participating in class discussions as much, and she seems anxious. Has anything changed at home?" Of course something had changed at home. My 8-year-old daughter was being interrogated daily by her teacher about whether her mother was neglecting her. Any child would become anxious under that pressure. "Maybe the problem isn't at home," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Maybe the problem is that Emma feels like she's being questioned constantly about our private family life." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Mrs. Mitchell said finally, her voice taking on a colder professional tone, "I understand that this might be difficult to hear, but I have concerns about Emma's well-being that go beyond normal academic issues. I have a professional and legal obligation to report these concerns if I believe a child is at risk." There it was. The threat made explicit. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen trying to make sense of what was happening. Why was Emma's teacher so determined to find problems with our home life? What did she gain from creating a narrative of neglect that didn't exist? The answer came in the most unexpected way. The following Monday, I had to leave work early because Emma had a fever. When I arrived at school to pick her up, I found her sitting in the nurse's office looking miserable. "Poor baby," I said, feeling her forehead. "Let's get you home and comfortable." As we were walking toward the exit, I heard Mrs. Mitchell's voice coming from the main office. The door was slightly ajar, and she was speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes, I understand the timeline," she was saying. "The home study needs to show clear evidence of an unsuitable environment. Financial instability, lack of supervision, emotional neglect. We've been building the case for months." I stopped walking, pulling Emma closer to me while I listened. The mother is completely clueless. She has no idea what's coming. By the time CPS gets involved, we'll have enough documented concerns to justify removal, at least temporarily. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed Emma's hand and hurried toward the exit, my mind reeling. Mrs. Mitchell wasn't just reporting concerns about Emma's welfare. She was actively building a case to have Emma removed from my home. But why? That evening, after Emma was feeling better and settled in bed, I called my friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal for a family law attorney. "Jess, I need advice, and I need you to keep this confidential." I told her everything. The pointed questions, the false concerns, the phone call I'd overheard. "This is serious," Jessica said when I finished. "If a teacher makes a formal complaint to CPS, they have to investigate. Even if the claims are unfounded, the process can be traumatic and expensive. You could lose Emma temporarily while they sort it out. But why would her teacher want to hurt us? What does she gain?" Jessica was quiet for a moment. "There are a few possibilities. Sometimes teachers develop inappropriate attachments to students and convince themselves that the child would be better off in a different situation. Sometimes there are financial motives, people who want to become foster parents for the monthly stipend. And sometimes," she paused, "sometimes what? Sometimes teachers try to remove children from homes so they can recommend specific foster families. Friends, relatives, people who will pay them for the referral. The idea made me sick, but it also made a horrible kind of sense. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Emma's stories about school. What I discovered was chilling. Mrs. Mitchell had been telling Emma stories about other children in foster care, describing how happy they were with their new families and how much better their lives had become. She'd shown Emma pictures of houses with big yards and multiple bedrooms, asking Emma if she ever wished she lived somewhere more spacious than our small apartment. She says some kids are happier when they get to live with families that have more time and money to take care of them properly. Emma told me one evening as we were making dinner together. "What did you say when she told you that?" I told her I love living with you and I don't want to live anywhere else. But she just smiled and said sometimes kids don't know what's best for them. The manipulation was sophisticated and systematic. Mrs. Mitchell was planting seeds of doubt in Emma's mind while simultaneously building a case that I was an unfit parent, but I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what Mrs. Mitchell was planning. That's when I made a decision that was both risky and necessary. I was going to confront her directly, but I was going to do it strategically. The next afternoon, I requested a meeting with Mrs. Mitchell under the pretense of discussing Emma's upcoming parent-teacher conferences. I arrived at the classroom carrying a small recording device in my purse, perfectly legal in our state as long as one party to the conversation consented to the recording. "Thank you for meeting with me," I said as we settled at the small conference table. "I wanted to discuss some of the concerns you mentioned on the phone." Mrs. Mitchell's expression shifted subtly. "Of course, I'm always happy to discuss Emma's well-being. I've been thinking about what you said about Emma seeming anxious lately, and I'm wondering if the problem might be that she feels like she's being questioned too much about our home life. I only ask questions that are relevant to her educational experience," Mrs. Mitchell said carefully. "Questions about whether I leave her alone? About whether we have enough food? About whether I have men over to the apartment?" I kept my voice level, professional. "Because Emma says you ask her about these things regularly, and frankly, they don't seem relevant to her education." Mrs. Mitchell's face flushed slightly. "As a mandated reporter, I have an obligation to be aware of my students' home situations. I understand that. But Emma says you've also been showing her pictures of other houses and talking about children who are happier in foster care. That seems to go beyond mandated reporting." The silence stretched between us. When Mrs. Mitchell spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I think you're reading too much into innocent conversations. Emma is a bright, sweet child who deserves every opportunity to thrive. If there are aspects of her current situation that are limiting those opportunities, then yes, I believe it's my professional duty to explore alternatives." "What alternatives?" I asked directly. Mrs. Mitchell hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw something calculating and cold. "There are many wonderful families in our community who would be happy to provide additional support for a child like Emma. Families with resources, stability, time to focus on her unique needs." "You mean foster families? Families who could give Emma opportunities that might not be available in her current situation." There it was. Mrs. Mitchell wasn't just planning to have Emma removed from my home. She had already identified where she wanted Emma to go. "Do you have a specific family in mind?" I asked. Mrs. Mitchell's eyes flickered. I couldn't discuss specific placements even if there were ongoing discussions. But she just confirmed that there were ongoing discussions. That evening, I called Jessica back and played her the recording. "This is unethical and possibly illegal," Jessica said after listening. "She's essentially conspiring to remove a child from a stable home for reasons that have nothing to do with the child's welfare." "What do I do?" "First, you document everything, every conversation, every interaction, every concern she's raised. Second, you get character references from people who know you and Emma well. Third, you prepare for the possibility that she's going to follow through on her threat." I spent the next week gathering documentation. Mrs. Chen wrote a detailed letter about the care she provided Emma and the stable. "Loving home environment," she observed. Emma's pediatrician provided records showing she was healthy, well-fed, and properly cared for. My employers confirmed my work schedule and reliability. I compiled financial records showing that while we weren't wealthy, we were financially stable with consistent housing and adequate resources. Most importantly, the security cameras I'd installed were capturing our daily routines. Emma doing homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. The two of us reading together before bedtime. Emma waking up to a prepared breakfast and a mother who helped her get ready for school with patience and love. But even with all this preparation, I wasn't ready for what happened next. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was getting ready for work when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see two official-looking people with clipboards and badges, Child Protective Services. My hands shook as I opened the door, but I forced my voice to remain calm. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Linda Santos from Child Protective Services, and this is my colleague Robert Kim. We've received a report concerning the welfare of Emma Rodriguez. May we come in?" This was it. Mrs. Mitchell had made her move. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. "Can you tell me what this is about?" Ms. Santos consulted her clipboard. "We've received allegations that Emma is frequently left unsupervised, that there are concerns about adequate food and housing, and that there may be issues with your emotional stability and ability to provide proper care. Every single false claim that Mrs. Mitchell had been building for months. I'd like to address each of these concerns, I said carefully. But first, can you tell me who made this report? The reports came from Emma's school, Mr. Kim said. Her teacher, Sarah Mitchell, filed a formal complaint expressing serious concerns about Emma's home environment. For the next 2 hours, I walked them through our apartment, showed them Emma's bedroom, our fully stocked pantry, the homework station we'd set up in the living room. I provided documentation of our financial stability, Emma's medical records, and character references from neighbors and employers. Most importantly, I showed them footage from the security cameras. You record your daily activities? Mrs. Santos asked, looking surprised. I installed cameras recently because I was concerned about some of the allegations that were being made, I said honestly. I wanted documentation of what our actual daily life looks like. We spent an hour reviewing footage from the past week. Emma and I making breakfast together, Mrs. Chen arriving each evening to watch Emma while I went to work. Emma doing homework with help and encouragement. The two of us playing board games and reading stories. This doesn't match the concerns that were reported, Mr. Kim said quietly to his colleague. When Emma came home from school, they spoke with her privately, as was standard protocol. I waited in the kitchen, my heart pounding, while they talked with my daughter in the living room. After 20 minutes, they called me back in. Emma seems happy, healthy, and well cared for, Ms. Santos said. She speaks very positively about her home life and her relationship with you. She did mention that her teacher asks her a lot of questions about home, which seems to make her uncomfortable. What happens now? I asked. We'll complete our investigation and file our report, Mr. Kim said. Based on what we've observed today, I don't anticipate any further action. However, we may follow up in a few weeks just to ensure continued stability. After they left, I held Emma while she cried. I was so scared they were going to take me away, she sobbed into my shoulder. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Baby, I whispered, fighting back my own tears. I promise. But I knew this wasn't over. Mrs. Mitchell had played her biggest card, and it had failed. She would either back down or escalate. She chose escalation. The next morning, I received a call from the school principal, Mr. Harrison. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to speak with you about an incident involving Emma yesterday afternoon. Could you come in this morning? When I arrived at his office, I found Mrs. Mitchell already there, looking composed and professional. Thank you for coming, Mr. Harrison said. Mrs. Mitchell has reported some concerning behavior from Emma yesterday after school. She's worried that Emma might be being coached to give false information to authorities. What kind of false information? I asked. Mrs. Mitchell leaned forward. Emma told the CPS workers that I asked her inappropriate questions about her home life. She claimed that I showed her pictures of houses and talked about foster care. These are serious allegations that could damage my professional reputation. Are they true? I asked directly. Of course not, Mrs. Mitchell said smoothly. I'm concerned that Emma is being influenced to make these claims, possibly as retaliation for my legitimate concerns about her welfare. Mr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Rodriguez, I have to ask, have you discussed these issues with Emma? Have you suggested that Mrs. Mitchell has done anything inappropriate? This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to share something with you, but I need your assurance that this conversation will remain confidential while you investigate. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of my conversation with Mrs. Mitchell, where she had essentially admitted to having ongoing discussions about alternative placements for Emma. The room went silent. Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Harrison said finally, his voice carefully controlled. I need to speak with you privately. I waited in the hallway for 30 minutes, listening to the murmur of heated conversation behind the closed door. When Mrs. Mitchell emerged, her face was pale and her professional composure had cracked. Mr. Harrison called me back into his office. Mrs. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. It appears there have been some serious boundary violations in Mrs. Mitchell's interactions with your daughter. I'm going to be conducting a full investigation, and in the meantime, I'm arranging for Emma to be transferred to Mrs. Patterson's class. What about Mrs. Mitchell? Mr. Harrison's expression was grim. That's a personnel matter that I can't discuss. But I can assure you that appropriate action will be taken. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from her new classroom. Mrs. Patterson was a veteran teacher with a warm smile and a no-nonsense approach that immediately put Emma at ease. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I asked as we walked home. "Good," Emma said, her voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "Mrs. Patterson is nice. She asked me about my favorite books, but she didn't ask any weird questions about you or our house." Over the next few days, the full scope of Mrs. Mitchell's scheme began to emerge. Mr. Harrison called to update me on the investigation's findings. "We've discovered that Mrs. Mitchell had inappropriate communications with several families in the community," he said. "It appears she was systematically identifying single parents and children who she believed would be better served by different living arrangements." "Was she getting paid for this?" Mr. Harrison paused. "We're still investigating, but it appears there were financial incentives involved. We've contacted the authorities and the district office. Mrs. Mitchell was ultimately fired and faced criminal charges for child endangerment and conspiracy to commit fraud. The investigation revealed that she had been working with a network of people who profited from facilitating questionable foster placements and adoptions. 3 other families came forward with similar stories of manufactured concerns and inappropriate questioning of their children. But the most shocking discovery came when investigators searched Mrs. Mitchell's home. They found detailed files on dozens of students, including photographs of their homes, financial information about their families, and what appeared to be assessments of their suitability for intervention. Emma's file was thick with fabricated incident reports, doctored conversations, and a timeline for having her removed from my care. The plan had been to have Emma placed temporarily with Mrs. Mitchell's sister-in-law, who received payment for fostering children. Once Emma was in their system, it would be much harder to get her back, and the legal fees alone could have bankrupted me. 6 months later, I received a call from Jessica with an update on the legal proceedings. "Mrs. Mitchell took a plea deal," she said. "She'll serve 2 years in prison and pay restitution to the families she targeted. Her teaching license has been permanently revoked." "What about the others involved?" "The foster family ring is still under investigation, but several arrests have been made. Your case was instrumental in bringing this whole thing to light." A year later, Emma was thriving in Mrs. Patterson's class. The anxiety and withdrawal that had marked her final months with Mrs. Mitchell were gone, replaced by the confident, curious child I'd always known her to be. "Mommy," she said one evening as we were doing homework together, "I'm glad you didn't let Mrs. Mitchell take me away." "Nobody could ever take you away from me, baby," I said, hugging her tight. "I would fight the whole world to keep you safe." "I know," she said simply. "That's what good mommies do." Looking back, I realized that Mrs. Mitchell made several crucial mistakes. She underestimated a mother's instinct to protect her child. She assumed that a single working mother would be too overwhelmed and under-resourced to fight back effectively. And she never imagined that I would be smart enough to document everything and build a case against her. Most importantly, she forgot that the truth has a way of revealing itself when someone cares enough to look for it. The cameras I installed captured not just our daily routines, but also the love, stability, and care that defined our home. The recording of our conversation provided evidence of her manipulative tactics and hidden agenda. And the thorough documentation I maintained gave CPS and school administrators a clear picture of what was really happening. Emma and I are closer than ever now. She knows that I will always believe her, always protect her, and always fight for what's right. And I know that she's growing up with a deep understanding of how to recognize manipulation and stand up for the truth. Mrs. Mitchell thought she could destroy our small family to serve her own agenda. Instead, she made us stronger and helped bring down a network of people who were preying on vulnerable children and families. Sometimes the people who seem most trustworthy are the ones you need to watch most carefully. And sometimes a mother's love and determination are the most powerful weapons against injustice. 3 years later, Emma is in 6th grade now, confident and happy. She still talks about Mrs. Mitchell sometimes, but not with fear, with understanding that some people make bad choices and that it's important to speak up when something doesn't feel right. I'm proud of you for protecting us. Mommy, she told me recently, I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. Even when it was scary, I replied. Our small apartment is still filled with cameras, not because we're paranoid, but because we learned that documentation can be the difference between justice and injustice. And because sometimes the most powerful truth is simply showing the world what real love and family look like. Mrs. Mitchell picked the wrong family to target. She thought she saw an easy mark, a single mother, working 2 jobs, just trying to get by. What she actually found was a mother who would move heaven and earth to protect her child, and a community that wouldn't stand for injustice. The system worked, but only because we made it work. Only because we refused to be victims and fought back with intelligence, preparation, and unwavering love. If you're going through something similar, document everything. Trust your instincts, get help from professionals, and never, ever give up fighting for your family. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or wealth, but with truth, love, and a mother's fierce determination to protect her child. Thanks for listening to our story. Subscribe if this resonated with you, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to fight to protect your family. Your voice matters, and your story could help someone else who's facing a similar battle. Remember, when someone tries to destroy your family, they're not just attacking you. They're attacking everything you love and value. Fight back with everything you have, because your children deserve a mother who will never stop protecting them. And to Mrs. Mitchell, wherever you are now, you picked the wrong mother.